Past the hills and rivers wide, where wildflowers freely bloom. In this land with skies so open, where can our children play? In cities bustling bright and loud, cars and lights that never sleep, do they find a piece of sky? Where can our children play? Bring them fields of green and gold, let their laughter echo clear. In a world so tightly wound, where can our children play? Mountains whisper ancient tales, forests sing in harmony. Will these wonders slip away? Where can our children play? Beyond the screens and towers tall, where dreams once were born and bred, do they carve new paths of joy? Where can our children play? Let's be stewards of this earth, guard the spaces wide and free. Do they find a piece of sky? Where can our children play? Bring them fields of green and gold, let their laughter echo clear. In a world so tightly wound, where can our children play? Bring them fields of green and gold, let their laughter echo clear. In a world so tightly wound, where can our children play?
Gagan. Quick bio of me. I'm the founder of a website called StopSprayingGlyphosate.com. Glyphosate is the active ingredient in Roundup that we know passes the cell membrane and disrupts our immune system and our emotional brain. Again, I'm a brain certified health coach with Amino Clinics. I'm a certified holistic health coach and a certified amino nutrition therapy coach. I really educate about how toxins impact our gut and our brain. And so 3 things that I am passionate about are the human brain, the human gut, and our precious earth. And how the poisons in the soil, actually where it starts off when the farmers are spraying these chemicals. And again, how we digest them and how it impacts our precious brain. So I'm going to go through this rather quickly because I have a lot of slides. I left my business cards over there, so if anybody wants to contact me afterwards, you have questions, or you want to talk about a family member, a child, a teenager, even a grandparent, feel free to reach out. My phone number's on me. So, fueling focus. How do amino acids support the 7 types of ADD and support the brain? Who in the room knows about amino acids? Okay. So basically what ends up happening is amino acids come from protein foods. And what they do is when you eat protein, harder to do when you're a vegan, not as hard, but still hard to do when you're a vegetarian, and easy to do if you're eating red meat, chicken, and fish, because those proteins drop back and they convert over to these amino acids that our brain uses. And it's really important. So out of the people who raise their hands on people they know, loved ones, family members, friends, who has been, out of those people, who has been diagnosed with ADD? Okay, and did you know that there are 7 types of ADD? So the 7 types are really important because Big Pharma wants to label our teens and our children nowadays, and that's really what I'm passionate about. They walk in, they go to a conventional medicine doctor, not all conventional medicine doctors, but they go into their general practitioner and they basically say, okay, my kid's out of control. They have sensory issues. Sensory issues are when light, touch, fluorescent lights affect the emotional brain. Or they seem to be ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity, or maybe they're just ADD. The reason that this matters is because if for some reason you have a loved one or a friend and they're on a pharmaceutical, how do you know if it's the right pharmaceutical? Because what modern day psychiatry and big pharma wants to do is to play Russian roulette on your brain, on your brain, on your brain, and your brain. And what I mean by that, there are over 80 different types of medications, not even counting all of the generics. And what they do is you walk in with this symptom, like, oh my gosh, I can't stay focused. Oh, let's try this. Oh, it didn't work. Well, let's take this out and let's try this one. Oh, it didn't work. Well, let's try this one. It didn't work. I feel a little bit more fatigued. Well, let's add this big pharmaceutical. Big pharmaceutical, big pharma, it has a place in the world. I do believe that there are times when Western and Eastern medicine need to meet. But the problem is, and one of the reasons that I love Dr. Amen, why I became one of his certified brain health coaches, is because he is a believer on first do no harm. And what I mean by that, if we circle back to the amino acids that come from our food, which go back into the 1800s, where Hippocrates said, let food be your medicine and medicine be your food. They didn't have things like Prozac. They didn't have things like Effexor. They didn't have things like Xanax. And what they're doing is they're playing that Russian roulette, and they're saying your brain type, your brain type, your brain type, your brain type, Shannon's brain type, they're all the same. So this Prozac should work for everybody. But that's not how it happens, because you can see here on the 7 different types, this is a surface scan right here. So it's basically looking at the blood flow. And you can see that there are some holes in the brain, some divots in the brain, lack of blood flow. So there is classic ADD, to where maybe somebody does have some symptoms of having ADD, but they're not hyper. And then you have the inattentive ADD, which basically they're not hyper, but they have a hard time focusing on paying attention to math. But when they're in science, because they love science, their prefrontal cortex, their executive brain, it really plumps up because they love science. And so children and teenagers and even adults, they're able to concentrate on things that they love, but when it comes to things that they're disinterested in, the blood flow falls in the brain, they can't pay attention, they can't focus, they get in trouble at school, the parents start yelling at them, or start you can't do this and you can't do that. Well, what happens is when you have different brain types, concentration and resting brain can be opposite. And what I mean by that is, and I'll use myself as an experiment. So I've had a brain spec with Dr. Amen. When my brain rests, it goes back to pretty much normal state. When I start concentrating, there's an area in my brain, we're going to talk about it. It's called the cingulate gyrus. It's your gear shifter. It's hot, it's on fire. And how do I know? Because the blood flow, and this is just an over-focused brain type, you can see this cingulate gyrus in the brain by SPECT imaging, how the blood flow is hot. So the blue in blood specs is a normal brain type. When you start getting red, your brain starts becoming on fire, the top 15% of active blood brain flow. When you're in the white, which I don't have an image here, but we will show one, it's the top 8%. And you cannot calm the brain down when it's on fire. I'm a Christian, and so I believe in the power of prayer. I believe in the power of meditation. I believe in God's healing. But when your brain is on fire, it needs something. It doesn't necessarily mean you need something from Big Pharma. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need a Prozac. or an Effexor or an Adderall. Because what's Adderall nowadays? It's literally a legalized speed. So what we're doing to our children when the teacher says your kid is out of control, he's hyper, he's doing that, you need to get him some Adderall. Why Adderall? Because it's one of the #1 prescriptions that's prescribed for our kids and our teens. And basically what you're doing is it's like giving that kid speed. Well, if the kid's already hyper, why do they need something that's even going to make them feel more energized? And then we have like the temporal lobe. Temporal lobes are maybe something that happened in a sports and they got hit in the side of the head. And now their focus and their mood, maybe they're angry, maybe they're oppositional defiant disorder. So that's a different type of ADD. And then you have the limbic, where somebody like me, because I've seen my brain spec, that's why I know how to work myself with amino acids, but in a limbic ADD brain, people can be sad, they can be overwhelmed, they could be negative, they could be stressed out with the everyday life, and that's because the area in the brain known as the limbic system, which regulates our thoughts, our sensory, it's on fire. How do you put it out? Again, we go back to big pharma is not always the answer. And then we have a ring of fire brain. And ring of fire is really when the whole entire brain is on fire. Every single organ, I'll say some names, but I'll go back to explaining them. The cingulate gyrus, the prefrontal cortex, the cerebellum, the temporal lobes, the basal ganglia, everything is on fire and it's saying, I need help. And most parents, most grandparents don't even know about it. So what do? Again, they take their child, their teenager, maybe their 20s and adults or 30s, maybe it's somebody in their 50s or 60s, and they take them in and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't handle my thoughts. I'm sad, I'm overwhelmed, I'm negative, I'm hyper. They say, okay, well, we think you're bipolar, schizophrenia. Why don't we start you on this mood stabilizer? How do they know if they're not looking? Why? Because they're playing Russian roulette on you. They don't go back and talk about root cause, which is where the poisons start in the soil, how they get to the market. We're eating these products that maybe we're not familiar with: Roundup, glyphosate, 2,4-D, atrazine, all these pesticides and herbicides that the farmers, and we're feeding those foods to our loved ones. Even cereal like Cheerios and General Mills. I mean, all of that stuff on their wheat is sprayed with these toxic chemicals. And think about like the parents who are in a rush and they may say, okay, well, eat this Pop-Tart. Well, what are you doing? You're giving your kid, your teenager, tons of sugar, and then you're sending them off to the teacher along with 19 or 20 other kids that may be hyper, kids that may have an attention issue. Why? Because maybe they're also eating Pop-Tarts. Maybe they're also eating the cereal, opposed to feeding it amino acids, which are eggs and bacon. And I know that life is really complicated and parents are running around, even as adults. So I always say, listen, if you don't have the time to do eggs and bacon, cook a bunch of eggs and bacon, put it in the refrigerator for the next day. So feeding the brain is important. And then we get to the anxious ADD, and we're going to talk about how these patterns cross. So a few minutes just on glyphosate. Glyphosate, again, is the active ingredient in Roundup. It got its first patent when it was invented in the 1950s, waiting game in the 1960s, and in the 1980s, farmers start using it all over the world. Then you get to the 1990s, and you have these GE crops, genetically modified organisms. So you will now see on the packaged food where it says non-GMO. So basically what a genetic modified organism is that the FDA, our government, not our government now because RFK has now stepped in, who has been working and fighting against this for decades, they spray the seed that they're getting ready to plant. Wheat, corn, soy. And what they're doing is they're spraying the seed with this Roundup herbicide and other herbicides. Why? Because you take the seed, you plant it in the soil, and a GMO When a farmer is spraying Roundup, atrazine, 2,4-D, it's not going to hurt the crop that it's growing. It's going to kill the weeds. But what happens in glyphosate, just so that you know, glyphosate, the reasons that you see like our bees dying, basically they're pollinating on the flowers, even dandelions, that have been sprayed with this. And what glyphosate is intended to do is to break the gut. It punctures holes in the intestines of bugs, and the bugs then explode and then they die. So if that's happening to bugs who are pollinating on the flowers and everything that they need to eat and survive and make honey, what do you think it's doing to your intestines, to a grandchild's intestines, to a child's intestine? It's designed to do the same thing, but the problem is it's spraying more and more and more. And what happens now are that these farmers are so used to, addicted to, I have to spray my Roundup. I'm demanded by whatever government form is watching, I have to spray the Roundup, and I have to spray so much of it because they don't know how to do regenerative farming. And so the latest guilty verdict that one of my friends, she's a caseworker with this law firm, Wisner and Baum, that there was a farming couple in Central California. They were growing crops. They had been farmers for decades. Both the husband and wife got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a cancer, which is what Roundup glyphosate causes. They, Roundup, Bayer, it used to be Monsanto that owned Roundup, now it's Bayer. They bought them for $66 billion. They were found guilty in order to pay, in one case, $2 billion in a cancer lawsuit. Has that made the news? Well, it has in the alternative social media, but how many of you knew about that? And yet we're still selling and buying conventional foods that are grown with these crops, where on one farming couple, it was a $2 billion award. The first award came to a gentleman who was a groundskeeper at a school, and he got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. He had two small kids when this first started. This was 5 or 6 years ago. They are just starting to pay it off. And you know what? They went back to the negotiation table because Bayer and Monsanto trying to fight it. He was awarded $66 million. No one could ever say, here's $66 million. Will you have 1 teaspoon of Roundup every single day for the rest of your life? Why? Because non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, there's no cure for it. But now he's traded his life because he didn't know. But thankfully, he got some award here. But he is now, his kids are teenagers. Yes, his kids will be set for the rest of his life after he passes, but there's no amount of money that I would trade my life for in order to set up myself. Yeah, $66 million, a lot of money, it is, but is my life worth more than $6 million, $66 million? Heck yeah, it is. Why? Because I have grandkids. So, 1 drop of glyphosate in 20 Olympic-sized pools, 1 drop, can change the chemistry in Olympic pools. What do you think it's doing to your body? Your DNA, your mitochondria, which is the energy of your blood. How many people, the second common complaint to doctors right now is chronic fatigue, brain fog, and lack of energy. Glyphosate is a water-soluble herbicide, meaning that it can cross cell membranes, which means it can cross the brain neurons because it's water-soluble. That was the work of Dr. Stephanie Seneff. So, what's not working in our broken brain system? 1, learning to focus is one of the greatest challenges right now. Inability to control thoughts, prioritize tasks, and to stay focused causes discouragement. Not only discouragement from us, but discouragement for parents raising children who are also affected by this. We right now, and including myself, we have an overwhelming to-do list. I mean, we have so much on our plate between keeping up on the news and catching up on everything, to the kids are coming home and I need to get dinner and I need to feed them breakfast and I need to pack lunches. our overwhelming to-do lists are just so much. We forget to give our mind what we are doing, and the more we allow our minds to run wild, meaning we can't capture our emotional thoughts, the wilder they will be. But we can train our minds to focus properly with lifestyle changes. Again, we talked about the 7 different types of ADD. Cingulate gyrus, I'm overfocused. My gear shifter is broke. Think about if you're driving your car and the brakes went out in your car, how would you stop it? You wouldn't be able to. You might be able to shove it in park. But the gear shifter is, I can't switch my thought. I have this overwhelming, anxious, aggravated, negative thought, and the only thing that I can focus on is the anxious, overwhelming, negative thought. Why? Because my gear shifter is broken, which is a lack of 5-HTP, which comes from amino acids that we'll talk about. We've got the temporal lobe brain. Temporal lobes are on the side of your brain here. This is mood control here. This is anger. This is rage. This is ability for the storage of short-term memories to long-term memories. We look at the uptick in Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, and most recently, now we're starting to hear more and more about sundowners' dementia, and that's when the sun starts going down and the dementia symptoms start getting worse. And then we have the limbic. We talk about that our mood regulator right here, the one that controls our overwhelming, negative, stressed out thoughts. Again, ring of fire. There's so many kids running around right now who are eating the foods, the conventional foods, foods laden in sugar. They run to McDonald's, they're going down to, buy the pizza from Domino's, from $2 Chuck's, whatever it may be. They're constantly feeding their immune system nothing but poison. But remember, your brain is consuming 33% of the calories that we're eating. So, and what about cell phones? How many of the kids or grandkids do you know that have cell phones? So, and then where do they keep them? Some of men, I see them keeping in the chest. Some of the boys put them in their back pockets. The girls, well, these are sensitive areas. You've got that cell phone, the radiation constantly pinging the phone. And then we see an uptick with, women trying to get pregnant. And they can't get pregnant. Well, if the man constantly has his phone in his pocket, guess what? In the men areas, it's going to regulate. It's like you're putting your body in front of a microwave and you expect for whatever you're standing in front of to work. And it doesn't work like that. And so this right here, you can see children, because their brains are still developing. Your brain is not developed. Shannon, Xander's brain is not developed until he's 25 or 26 years of age. It's a process called myelinization, and myelinization is actually when it starts creating, we'll call them the fat, the phospholipids. It starts myelinating with the myelination sheath in the back of the cerebellum, and it continues to the prefrontal cortex. Your prefrontal cortex is your executive brain. It's a third of your brain. It's the ability to stay organized. It's where you're impulsive, compulsive. It's controlling the ability to say, no, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm not going to smoke marijuana. No, I'm not going to have a beer. No, I'm not going to throw a temper tantrum. Yes, Mom, I'll go and help clean up my room. That's what the prefrontal cortex is. So when you take a look at it, you can see an adult. Why? Because our brain is fully developed. It doesn't mean it's intact, meaning that doesn't mean that we haven't suffered any traumatic brain injuries, concussion or not concussion, but you can see where the penetration is. Xander's age, 10-year-old age. You can see how the penetration, 5-year-olds, and how many kids, and I get it, sometimes parents are going out to a restaurant and they want to give their kid so that they can gain. I get stuff like that. It's for short periods of time. But when the kid is constantly on their phone, or how many How many children and teenagers do you know where they put their phone right on the side of the bed, not even thinking of the microwave radiation exposure? And then they have sleep disorders. They can't sleep. They're more anxious. They're more sad. Well, if all of that is penetrating, guess what's there? Brain neurons. Guess what's dying? Brain neurons.
Can you turn it off though at night? Like what if you turn the whole phone off at night?
Well, you can, but you should never have it. Because if you think about it, when you turn your phone off,
completely.
no, when you turn your phone off and you turn it back on, is the time on the cell phone the time that you turned it off, or is it the current time? It's pinging. It's like standing in front of a microwave. Why? Even when the phone is off, it's pinging. So always have the cell phones out of the bedroom. If they have to have their alarm clock on, take the airplane mode, set their alarm clock, have them set it outside and put it on the floor at the door. They're still going to hear it. So,
What about not smartphones? Flip phone?
how are they? It's still a cellular connection. It's still going to a cell tower to connect. So, again, healthy brain. This is a surface. The colors mean nothing. It's just in a SPECT imaging. That's a perfectly circumference brain. Look at an unhealthy brain. Environmental toxins. Could it be Roundup? Could it be somebody smoking marijuana? Could it be somebody drinking alcohol? Could it be the lack of amino acids because we have a vegan? Could it be somebody who has mold mycotoxins? Could it be somebody who's sitting in front of, cell phones? Could it be that you're living in a mildew apartment or a mildew home? This is a toxic brain spec. It's very unhealthy. So if this right here is my deep limbic and I have no blood flow, how can I shift my thoughts from being negative, overwhelmed, and stressed out if I don't have blood flow going into that area? The same thing with the prefrontal cortex right here. If a child or a teen or an adult has divots in their brain, low blood flow, either A, maybe it's genetics, B, you're not feeding your brain protein foods that break down to amino acids, how can you think that a child or a teen that doesn't have blood flow, how can you think that they can stay organized, focused, not compulsive? They can't, they don't have the blood flow there. So, again, all the different types of ADD, we already talked about that. Let's talk a few minutes just on anxiety. So we all have anxious thoughts. It's just part of life. We all get overwhelmed. Big Pharma, 80% of all the people who take Big Pharma medicine for anxiety say it doesn't work, but they don't know the alternative. They're never told about foods, protein foods. They're never told about amino acids. It's not a one-size Big Pharma. It's not everybody needs Xanax. It's not everybody needs Prozac. Pure anxiety, pure depression, mixed anxiety and depression, overfocused anxiety and depression, temporal lobe anxiety and depression, cyclic anxiety and depression, where your moods ebb and flow, but you're not really high and low like in somebody that's got bipolar, unfocused anxiety and depression. And guess what? We talk about the 7 types of ADD. So a lot of times there's crossover in ADD and anxiety symptoms. So it's not uncommon. Why? Because they share the same compartment of the brain. So for somebody who has overfocused ADD, it's not uncommon for somebody to have overfocused anxiety and depression. So I'm just going to read some of these emotional stats. 26% of our adult population are affected by psychiatric disorders. 60 plus million Americans. 40 million people have anxiety. And sadly, 67%, and this was back in 2017 where we know that there's been that uptick, say that they have no improvements. Children have had urinary levels tested for pesticides. I'm going to talk just one quick second. This right here is a test that I ran The water systems for Heber and Charleston have glyphosate in the water. Small amounts, but still. So the gentleman who is responsible for the water, actually I just handed this to him, and they're going to start looking at it. I live on a well in Charleston. Here's my glyphosate report. So here's my poison, here's my chemical poison. I have nothing in my well. I opted not to connect to the culinary system. And it's only because I knew that the culinary system for Charleston and Heber, they've all got small minutes. Think about the restaurants in Heber. How many live in Heber? Okay, so how many times you go out to eat and the waitress or waiter, they bring down with a cup of water and ice? It's not filtering out glyphosate. So guess what you're drinking? We go back to the $2 billion guilty verdict on Monsanto Bayer. So, and how one drop to change 20 Olympic-sized pools. And then you get a refill on that cup of water. So there's been 8 million, or 1 in 10 children, now take stimulant medications like Ritalin, which again is an amphetamine or it's speed. Think about that, 1 in 10. 42% in Wellbutrin, which actually is an SSRI or a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, which works on the cingulate gyrus for the anxious thoughts. So Big Pharma says, oh, you've got anxiety? Guess what? We could do Wellbutrin. Every single SSRI, every single depressant medication has a black box warning of may cause suicidal effects. But what are we giving our children and what are we giving our teenagers? That's not good. So 300% increase in ADHD medicine from 1993 to 2000. And guess what? The age keeps getting younger. And that's the sad thing. I now have people with children that I coach that are 3 years old that the doctor has said your kid needs to go on Ritalin. Well, why wouldn't we start with root cause? Why wouldn't we start with the red dyes, the blue dyes, which RFK is working on? Why don't we start with the foods that we're eating? Why don't we start talking about our gut and how it connects to our precious brain? The brain that runs 100% of everything that we do. Modern day psychiatry, conventional medicine never goes back to putting the pieces of the puzzle together. 50% of cases can persist into adulthood. 1 in 10 Americans take an antidepressant. ADD, ADHD, anxiety, and depression is now a label that we give our children between 8 to 15. Why? Because we go into our doctor and we say, my kid's out of control. He can't keep his room organized. He's disorganized at school. He can't remember where his homework is. Oh, let's put him on speed. Let's give him Ritalin. That's going to fix it. Without looking at root cause on what we're putting into our mouth, which is feeding our digestive tract, which is feeding our precious brain. So these are some post-COVID, and unfortunately, children and teenagers took a hit in COVID. Why? Because they weren't going to school. They were mandated to wear masks. They can't get the oxygen. They're breathing in and out their toxins, the carbon monoxide. They're not feeding the brain that the brain needs oxygen. And they were demanded to wear masks. And then they couldn't go to school. So the children maybe that were being abused at school, or the parents both had to work and they couldn't take off work, were expected to go in front of a laptop and stay focused when they haven't eaten the right foods, they don't have the right amino acids, their brain's on fire. But little Jimmy, you sit in front of this computer for 7 hours, and I expect you to do your homework, and I expect you to get A's and B's, but you have to sit here and not give up. They have no social interaction. They went out of gym, no gym, no playtime, no going outside. Let's wear our masks. So we're not getting oxygen to your brain, but little Jimmy, let's do it. Post-COVID now. We talked about The emotional brain, pre-COVID, we're going to talk about, and if you want to take pictures of this, let me know. So, 1 in 2 adults, 1 in 2, will be diagnosed with a mental order in their lifetime. 1 in 25 Americans live with a serious emotional brain health illness. Maybe in sports when they were in high school, they got, they were playing football and they had a brain injury, but it didn't result in a concussion. Your brain is like soft butter. That's the consistency. And what happens is you have these little spikes on the back of your brain and in the front of your brain. And they call it coup-coup-con-true. So let's just say you have a kid playing football, didn't get a concussion, but he was hit hard. So what happens is that consistency of butter in the brain, boom, into the spikes, boom, back into the spikes, boom, into the front. May not have had a concussion, but not saying that it hasn't injured something because their brain's not fully developed, it doesn't mean it wasn't perforated. And how many of you have even heard of coup-coup-con-true? Probably not. Not something that modern day medicine really wants to talk about. It gets deep. So then we go back to post-COVID. 1 in 5 children at some point will be diagnosed with a mental illness. In 2006, antidepressants soared over $1.5 billion. Who's getting rich off of somebody that you love? Take this big pharma. Right now, big pharma looks at children who are getting sick as patients for life. They're not out to heal. And I'm not saying all conventional medicine doctors, you're better off in the functional and the integrative side, but if they have a patient for life, guess what? That has increased. Mental health disorders are now annually over 2.5 trillion, and by 2030, $6 trillion. Who's getting rich off of somebody that you know or love? Most Americans are living in significant stress, uncertainty, which has increased the mental health disorders. Street drugs are on the rise. Ketamine, marijuana, opiates, kratom, alcohol. Patty and I just did a talk on the medicinal medicines, the marijuana that these kids are addicted to, or the ketamine, where you see all of these ketamine clinics popping up. And guess what? You walk into a ketamine clinic, they're not going to dive into your DNA. They're going to get very little information on, what was your lifestyle at, what kind of foods that you're eating. They're going to immediately go to a synthetic, it's a ketamine. But they say it's going to help or fix or heal your anxiety, your ADD, your depression. But guess what? What's ketamine? It's an animal tranquilizer. Why would you let somebody put an animal tranquilizer in your brain via IV? Because they say, guess what? Your anxiety is going to go away. Your depression going away. And now I'm not saying that ketamine may not play a role in somebody with severe PTSD, somebody coming back from the army who has served decades fighting for our freedom. I'm not saying ketamine wouldn't be good in that type of situation. But why the heck are we giving our children ketamine? It is crazy to me. So we are living with 85,000 plus chemicals in the air we breathe, the food that we're eating, and the water we drink, yet families still don't know about these chemicals. So, just to put it in perspective, all of the ADDs that we talked about, here is big pharma medication. How about if we could do diet and other interventions? For somebody who's classic ADD, higher protein, lower carbs, exercise, much better lifestyle than injecting, a synthetic poison or taking something with a black box warning saying it may cause suicidal effects. Higher protein, lower carbs, higher protein, lower carbs, higher protein, lower carbs, higher protein, lower carbs, a diet balance between protein and carbs, because somebody with the ring of fire where their brain's on fire, they need complex carbs. They don't need McDonald's French fries. What they need are sweet potatoes. some brown rice, some quinoa. Why? Because stuff like that is breaking down to the amino acids that we're feeding our gut, that's breaking down and feeding our brain to calm the fire. So, do drugs do harm to the brain? Ketamine, marijuana, look at the uptick just in Utah alone on fentanyl. I mean, fentanyl is one, it's a killer. And all the drugs, like listen, back when I was 16 years old, the marijuana back then was way different from the marijuana because of the fentanyl crisis that we have. Toxic brain spec. If this is my deep limbic, how can I have the ability to keep my thoughts calm and stable if I have no blood flow, or if the kid or adult or teenager is abusing it because they're putting their fire out with alcohol, drugs, and stimulants? They have no idea what's going on with their brain. They just know it makes them feel better. The problem is it's addictive behavior that's hurting the brain. And yet, conventional medicine isn't going back to saying, hey, let's go talk about root cause. What do you eat? What are you feeding? What are you putting in your body? Oh, I'm a vegan. Well, let me tell you how complicated it is to be a vegan and get amino acids. Can it be done? Yes. But you risk the pros and cons on, hey, I'm going to get my amino acids from nuts. Well, guess what? Nuts have high oxalates. And if your body can't eliminate the oxalates, guess what? You could end up with kidney stones. So, and that's a good point. So, some of the foods, organic nut butters, organic walnuts, peanuts, organic beans. I always say visit EWG, environmentalworkinggroup.org. Look at the Dirty Dozen, which are the 12 sickest foods sprayed with all these chemicals, and also the Clean 15. The 15 foods that they say, you know what, it's okay to eat conventional. Not everybody can afford organics. If a strawberry is on the Dirty Dozen, but you have a banana on the Clean 15, buy the banana unconventional and skip the strawberry for now. Right. And those are the choices that we can help educate you on what to do. So, again, we're going to talk about different types of ADD. I'm just going to go by this really quick. So, prefrontal cortex, it's one of the most important parts of the brain. Why? Because it's your executive brain. It helps you to make decisions. It helps you to not be impulsive. It helps you to stay organized and focused. So when little Jimmy is going to school, he's got his backpack together. He's got his homework in there. That's what the prefrontal cortex does. Impulse control, organization, planning, judgment, empathy, insight. And we like to refer it as Jiminy Cricket. Jiminy Cricket was always on Pinocchio's shoulder. What was he saying? Oh. You better not do that. You better not do that. And Pinocchio said, oh, I'm going to do that. My brain is not fed these protein foods and amino acids. I'm going to do that. And what did it lead to? It led him to getting in trouble. Where are our children? Where are our teens? Constantly in trouble. Why? No protein, no amino acids. Nobody's talking about root cause. So this is a brain neurotransmitter. So it's a brain neuron. I'll make it as easy as possible. You have an axon and you have a dendrite, the beginning and the end. So whatever neurotransmitters, which are in our brain, they come to the end of the axon and they say, okay, I need to take this chemical messenger and get it to the dendrite so I can keep going. Well, what happens is if this synaptic junction right here is broke, because we don't have enough of the amino acids or we don't have enough of the cofactors, B vitamins, zinc, magnesium. Those are cofactors. Why? Because what they do is they assist getting in the amino acids into the brain's neurons. And if this is broke, guess what? Your brain is broke. So, going back to the glyphosate, this is not the most recent slide, but you can see really how toxic. And right now, and I don't have the current slide, this is from 2014, they say glyphosate now is in the soil and will remain in the soil forever. And let's think about this. Let's break this down. We talk about water. So when they spray, it's got about a 2-mile radius on a windy day. So it's spreading. And then we're breathing it in. and then we're drinking it. Why? Because these farmers are spraying. It's going down into our water system, going down to the aqueducts. Those aqueducts are saying, okay, let's take Heber water and send it to Wallsburg. Why do I know? Because I've studied the aqueducts underneath. So all these chemicals leaking into our water system, which goes back to what's in our water. How do we know how much damage it's doing? So glyphosate. And then we get into hospital discharges for people with ADD and anxiety. Take a look at this. This is back in the 1990s where Roundup was introduced. We talked about the patents that Monsanto Bayer. It started up here. Take a look where we are now. It's increasing, increasing. And what do we talk about? How big pharma, how Ritalin, how Effexor, how all of these stimulants are going to be able to fix this until we stop spraying herbicides and pesticides, until we start educating people like you, and you take this information, you're saying, hey, take a look at this card, talk to this lady. You know, we have to spread the information. I cannot do this alone. Patty cannot do this alone. We all have to share in the education together because this is not acceptable. Okay, Crohn's disease. How many people know people with digestive disorders? Okay. So you go in, you have a digestive disorder, they're going to tell you to take this big pharma medicine and it's going to fix it. They're never going to go back to root cause. Take a look at where they started spraying Roundup. Look at where the digestive disorders, Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. Look at where we are. Why? Because glyphosate damages and harms the intestines, where 80% of your immune system, and when this glyphosate from like wheat, corn, soil, it's hammering away at what they call the tight junction on the cell membrane. That wheat is like sandpaper. And before you know, you're sanding and sanding and sanding, and guess what? It's breaking open. And guess what's leaking in and out of your precious cells? All of the pesticides, all of the herbicides, all of the chemicals that we use in modern day farming. Yet doctors still are not talking about this. So, we have an inflamed brain. How do we know? Healthy brain spec, healthy blood flow brain spec, inflamed brain. Kind of see that whole ring of fire going on right there. So here we talk about the symptoms. Here we talked about the problems. We're feeding you exactly what is going on, environmental toxins, agriculture chemical, heavy metals, EMFs, diet. What does it lead to? Chronic stress, pain, aging, hormonal imbalance. The water tests we talked about, the tight junctions when they're broke, all of the bacteria, viruses, toxins leak in and out right into the bloodstream. Your blood is being carried throughout your entire body, including your brain. So, cingulate gyrus, the gear shifter, we talked a little bit about that. Your anxious thoughts, being able to shift your thoughts. This is a brain spec right here. You can kind of see ring on fire. This one shows the top 8% of active blood flow. My brain is on fire. I need to put the fire out. So here's where we get into talking about solutions. So I like to break it down to where, think of a dresser drawer. In your dresser drawer, you have compartments for shirts, socks, pants, and shorts. And let's just say somebody's sock drawer is completely empty. They need a pair of socks. They're going to reach in that sock drawer to get socks. What's there? Nothing, because it's empty. We take that back to amino acids. We take it back to food. So we talk about what feeds these amino acids. We have amino acids like GABA, which you already have that neurotransmitter in your brain. That's the calming. We talk about 5-HTP, which is also calming, another amino acid. We talk about catecholamines, such as dopamine, which helps with the adrenaline, and norepinephrine. And we talk about endorphins that feel good. It's kind of like when you hug a baby and you just have that loving feeling. So what are amino acids? There are 20 amino acids. 9 of them our body does not make. We need to get it from dietary supplements and food. So what destroys some of these amino acids? Tryptophan, which is going to methylate over to serotonin. We talk about tyrosine. It's all being damaged in the soil. Why? Because the soil is toxic and the roots of the plants, when they're growing, they don't have the tyrosine, they don't have the tryptophan, they don't have that in the soil, so guess what? Nothing's coming up to the plants. A carrot is not a carrot like it was back in the days where my grandparents grew up. So again, 20 amino acids, 9 of them our body does not make. We have to get it from food. We have to get it from dietary supplements. Let's just talk about the 4 neurotransmitters that matter the most. GABA. Out of 100% of the neurotransmitters in the brain, only 20% of them calm you. The other 80% excite you. They're known as excitatories. Then there is the serotonin, which is calming. That's the happy hormone. We have the dopamine and the catecholamines, which allow us to stay focused, our brain energy, to be ability to find joy and pleasure. And we have the endorphins, which are love, joy, and peace. So I'm going to skip over that. So what is GABA? GABA, again, is that calming neurotransmitter in the brain. You can get the GABA, the amino acid dietary supplement, in supplements. Why would I do that? Because I don't want to take Prozac. I know that I'm anxious. I know that I'm overwhelmed. I know that I'm negative. I know that these amino acids put the fire out in the brain that help to calm the blood-brain flow down. Then we get into the symptoms of being GABA deficient. Panic attacks, PTSD, epilepsy, tense and agitated, nervous, predicting the worst, being negative, fear of heights and tight places, being sad, poor motivation, hopeless, tends to isolate, burned out, insomnia, benzo, and alcohol addiction. Why? Because doctors know benzodiazepines. They know Prozac. They know Effexor. But they often don't know the amino acids. So what can they take? If you're trying to calm yourself, if you're trying to calm a kid, if you're trying to calm a teenager, what are the solutions if I don't want to? I'm not a big pharma girl. And again, I'm not saying that there's not a place in Western medicine. You know, if I have a bad infection, I'm not saying an antibiotic isn't going to help. We look at GABA, we look at taurine, we look at L-theanine, we look at magnesium, we look at inositol, we look at fish oil, omega-3s. We look at B6, which is a cofactor. We look at B12, which is a cofactor. We look at zinc. How many doctors are going in and running blood work like this on your child, your teen, or yourself? The fuel that fills our brain, turkey, fish, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, mushrooms, tomatoes, peas, sweet potatoes, white tea, even some probiotics. Protein matters to the brain. Why? Because it breaks down to amino acids, and guess what those amino acids feed? They feed our brain, they feed our cells, and they feed our body. We need to nourish our body with things that we can get from foods and dietary supplements. So functions of serotonin, I'm just going to kind of whiz through this one. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter, we talked a little bit about this, that shifts your moods and plays a crucial role in negative and overwhelming thought patterns. Cofactors are important for the gear shifter to work. So gear shifter gets stuck, mood regulation, oppositional defiant disorder, rage, argumentative, worries, OCD, emotional flexibility. It goes on and on and on. Compulsive is a key word there. So what are the fuels? What fuels the gear shifter? What fuels if you're not a big pharma person? Tryptophan, which breaks down to 5-HTP, which fuels the serotonin in our brain. L-theanine, amino acid. Inositol. How many people have children or have seen or people that pull their hair, maybe pick at their fingernails? That's a serotonin. Yeah, it's a serotonin deficiency. These are cofactors. Even niacin can be a cofactor for some people. Calming foods for optimal brain health. Smart carbs, sweet potatoes, brown rice, steel-cut oats, berries, apples, cherries, peppers, sweet corn, cantaloupe. They help upregulate the serotonin. Remove the troubled carbs, things like crackers and pancakes and Pop-Tarts and sweet cereals. They're not helping. Then we get to the catecholamines. It's the fuel that fuels our executive brain, the dopamine, the noradrenaline, and the epinephrine. What are some of the symptoms? Short attention span, distractibility, disorganized, procrastination, lack of drive, pain, pleasure, poor impulse control, restless, hyperactive, crave and need substances for energy, don't feel satisfaction in life, the reward deficiency, which is part of the prefrontal cortex. Okay, what are some of the supplements? L-phenylalanine, tyrosine, L-dopa, rhodiola, ginseng, L-theanine, taurine. The list goes on and on. What about sending your kid with decaf green tea? Why decaf green tea? Because the catecholamines in the tea are very helpful, and because it's decaf, it's going to open up the blood flow to this prefrontal cortex. So if you have children in school and they have a hard time staying active, guess what? Give them some green decaf tea, and if you have to put a little organic honey in it, that's fine. But send them off to school. Why? Because it's going to plump up the prefrontal cortex. It's going to help them stay focused better. So, and again, you come back to thinking of high proteins. You know, we can include beans and seeds and nuts and high protein veggies like broccoli and spinach. Endorphins. Endorphins are that group that's loving feeling, like when you're hugging a baby. They run together with the catecholamines, and it's kind of the seesaw in relationship. So if you're going to work on endorphins, it's not common that you also have to support the prefrontal cortex in the dopamine, in the noradrenaline, in the adrenaline, because it's a fine balance. If you are taking something for one, you may feel that maybe your dopamine, your ability to have attention and joy and pleasure, what do? You go back to feeding it more protein foods, and it's that fine balance, that seesaw effect. Then we talk about what being low, sensitive to emotional pain, often feel sad, lonely, hurt, cry or tear up easily, addicted to sugary foods, history of chronic pain, numbness, loneliness, grief, chronic stress depletion, hormonal imbalances, genetics, childhood attachment disorders, brain injuries. There's a list that goes on and on. Love, crave, comfort, junk food, drugs, and alcohol. When your endorphins are low, you crave those type of foods. We go back to the marijuana, the kratom, the heroin, the alcohol, the tobacco, the starch. We're not looking at root cause. Then we talk about what are some of the supplements that can help. D-phenylalanine, magnesium glycinate, L-theanine, vitamin C, CBD oils that don't contain the THC, essential oils, reishi mushrooms, ashwagandha. We want to fill the dresser drawer that's empty, and we want to fill it with foods and essential amino acids that our body is not making. Requires a high protein diet, ginseng, fish oil. Why? Because your brain is 66% fat. So things high in fat, your egg yolks, your fish oils, those matter to the brain, especially if you have a child or teenager that's, has had an injury or they're struggling to stay with the attention. So again, we talk about what happens in the neurotransmitters and how it's going to take the electrical signal from an axon to a dendrite, protein foods, lifestyle changes, studies. Your kid comes home, they're hyper, they can't focus. Before you sit them down at a desk to do homework, guess what? Make them go run around. Make them do a lap around the backyard. Make them do jumping jacks. Make them do sit-ups. Make them do some type of exercise. Why? Because it's stimulating the brain to make its own serotonin, its own endorphins, its own natural feeling good, happy hormones that really is coming just from changing the diet and doing exercises. Things like acupuncture. Dr. Don Dumar at Community Health and Wellness is really well known for the acupuncture. Hugs, yoga, meditation, prayer. Just going for a walk with your kid when they come home from school. Hyperbaric oxygen, lymphatic massage, lowering your stress, your oxidative stress. 95% of the serotonin, what causes those anxious thoughts, are made in the gut. And if the gut is broken, the brain is broken. The healthy brain foods that feed the serotonin, feed the dopamine, obviously troubled carbs, crackers, pancakes, waffles, Pop-Tarts, sweet cereals, muffins, bagels, pasta, rice. They are not nourishing the body. They are not nourishing our precious brain.
Even like whole wheat pasta?
If it's organic, It's okay. I always say, you know, if you can, everything in moderation. So if you have a whole wheat pasta, maybe you can do a quinoa pasta, a sweet potato pasta, and just kind of alternate it. And if a kid just says, oh, I'm not eating that sweet potato pasta, guess what? Take your organic wheat pasta and mix a little bit of it in, colors of the rainbows. And then slowly but surely start removing the wheat, because even though wheat is some wheat is organic, it doesn't mean that it's not disruptive to the gut. And if it's disruptive to the gut, guess what? It's causing inflammation in the brain known as inflammothrombotic immunological response. That's inflammation in the brain. When somebody's brain is on fire, you have to have stuff that's going to put the fire out. And back to, what would the world look like with less disease? What if you could take this information and educate your neighbor? You know, what if you can say, hey, maybe call her and talk to her? What if we could spread this information? Think of how much healthier our children would be. If you see your neighbor and they're out there spraying the weeds and the dandelions, which dandelions are very medicinal. I mean, Dr. Zach Bush is up in Canada, and he's actually feeding the cows who have lymphatic or have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. He's using dandelions in his cancer therapy. Spread the word. If we all participated in what we're doing, my passion is educating on what is better for our children, what is better for my grandchildren, and that's what matters to me. If you see your neighbor spraying Roundup, just say, hey, did you know that's poisonous and it causes cancer? And I just saw that talk, and farmers that were spraying it, you know, for 25 years got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and they were awarded $2 billion. Have something printed out. If you want something, I have things. Please feel free to contact me. I will be happy to send you what I have. The last thing I want to talk about real quick is the 7 phases of toxicity. So, and then feel free to take this picture. Phase 1 is elimination. You want to eliminate the foods. We have to eliminate the toxins. We have to sweat it out. We have to urinate it out. We have to have the bowel movements. If you're not, people aren't having, 1, 2, or 3 bowel movements a day, guess what? You're not getting those toxins out. What they're doing is they're being reabsorbed in the gut. Phase 2 is inflammation. My fingers feel tight. I've got some fluid in my knee. I've got some fluid in my ankles. I have chronic fatigue. I have brain fog. That's phase 2 of that. You get phase 3, you start getting infections. Maybe it's somebody that's got eczema or dermatitis, or maybe they just have like rashes. That's phase 3. Phase 4, bioaccumulation. You're starting to accumulate with these toxins that are affecting every single organ in your body. It now crosses over that cell membrane, and guess what? You're in phase 5. Your mitochondria, your chronic fatigue, your brain fog, your fatigue. Why? Because it's damaging now the inside of the cell. Phase 6, degeneration, body, organ parts. You start having issues. You go and you're going to the doctor and like, hey, you've got some kidney issues, or maybe you've got some liver issues, or maybe you have that inflammation that's causing autoimmune issues. And then you get into phase 7. And that's when it is starting to destroy the inside of a cell. Your mitochondria, your energy, the ability to stay focused and not feel inflamed and sick. And phase 7 is the last phase. Doesn't mean you can't fix it, because you can always work on yourself, work on your body, work on environmental toxins that take you back to phase 1, and that is the goal. So if you're interested in learning more about this, my business cards are there. Please feel free to contact me. But I thank you all for coming in and watching my talk.
Bring them fields of green and gold, let their laughter echo clear. In a world so tightly wound, where can our children play? Bring them fields of green and gold, let their laughter echo clear. In a world so tightly wound, where can our children play?